everyone, and welcome to the latest instalment of Brave Stories. I'm Claire Peters from Channel 4, and I'm joined here today by Katrin from Starcom. Hello, welcome.
Hi.
So we are here today to talk about ageism. So when I first got this brief around ageism, I thought brilliant. But I must admit, I was expecting someone in their late 50s, maybe 60s. I'm 46, you're 48. Why the hell are we here talking about ageism? I certainly don't feel old.
Nor do I, and actually that's one of the joys of working in this industry, is it keeps you feeling young and keeping you feeling really engaged. But actually when you look around, I don't see people over 45, particularly in agencies, particularly not those in leadership positions.
Yeah.
So we just don't represent what the world is out there in the working population.
Yeah, and you were talking yesterday about, when we were chatting about the all-in census and some of the findings from there. I mean, you know, we are massively underrepresented in that. So I don't know, over 45s, were you saying?
Yeah, over 45s. And then that massively drops off after 55. So already we're starting to see a real area that we need to work on. And it's not one of the focus areas for their action plan for the future, but clearly when we're looking at a dearth of people to be able to recruit,
yeah,
actually we need to be looking at a much wider pool than we have been before.
And I mean, for the interest of the audience out there, tell us a little bit about your career path, how you've got to where you are today.
Sure. I would say it's probably one of those squiggly careers.
I think most of them are, aren't they?
I know, I didn't grow up to be what I wanted to be. But I started in agency life. I did 10 years there, and then I'd say in my mid-30s, I kind of lost my way. I went media owner side, I did freelance, I worked also in auditing, so always agency adjacent,
yeah.
But I was looking for what my next long-term path could be, because when I was looking around me, the mentors that I had when I first started had left already, and they were women in their late 40s, early 50s. And I was getting a very strong message that you needed to find an alternative because it wasn't a long-term strategy for me.
And are you sort of where you set out to be, or is there more that you want to do, or are you kind of sort of quite happy at where you are in your career now?
I'm very happy where I am at the moment, and I've been lucky that I've had 8 years at Starcom, and my career has really progressed there, and I felt that there've always been those opportunities. You always look, with the classic question, where do you want to be in 5 years' time? And I don't think I've ever plotted that out. I had a very clear idea though when I first started in the industry exactly where I wanted to be. I wanted to be on 30, under 30. I wasn't sure beyond that what I wanted to do, but that was a real set point that I wanted to achieve. And when I passed that point, then I really felt like, oh my God, so what's left? I'm a failure, I'm a wash-up, I haven't been recognised as being stellar. And I think that's, and I know that now there are the over 40, there's a 40, under 40, or over 40.
Yeah.
But in a way, that still makes it all about age. It still sets it around this, rather than being able to be about what you can contribute at whatever age you're at. We've got some fantastic people who are in their early 20s who are leading teams and are really contributing, but struggle to get the gravitas necessarily with older clients and struggle to get the face time with them because they're seen to be too young. Equally, as someone who's older, I have different roles put upon me.
Yeah, I guess that leads us into this sort of idea of experience and youth versus wisdom, if you like. But do you think we are undervaluing experience within this industry?
I think we let it slip through our fingers. I don't think we undervalue it. I think we value it when we see it, we recognise it. I think though that as spend moves more and more towards digital, we sometimes mistake knowledge for experience and understanding. And I think increasingly what you need are people who can help translate some of these new technologies and these, well, actually they're not even that new, but the new thinking, and help translate that into a wider communication argument for clients and help them understand how it fits into everything that they want to do. And it's not some specialist section that people should feel afraid of, and equally that it's not something that is closed off to people over a certain age group.
I mean, it's interesting to talk about clients as well, and within my role, I see a lot of clients, and actually, I'm always struck by how much older clients seem to be than our industry. Actually, and you know, there is that sort of barrier, I guess, if you're slightly younger and you want to try and talk to people of that age, then you know there is that sort of element of, like you say, gravitas in the room, and that's bought by our age group because we have that experience. So, I mean, are there any examples you can think of where, you know, that's really held you in good stead? Where there's been either a client or a moment where you think, actually, this is where my experience is coming through?
I would say within pitches, you are naturally, you have seen similar situations before. So you don't feel quite as, or I certainly don't feel as phased by if a problem comes up, or there will have been an example that I will have come across generally before, and I don't feel quite so on the spot, and that's usually helpful. I think with clients who, it's easier to build a rapport with someone who's like you, and equally I work on a number of brands on P&G that have an older audience actually as an active age, you know, as a target audience, and we live in a bubble already within London, and what helps is to have a variety of people within the workforce that can mean that we are not in an age-related bubble either.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about representation a lot in our industry, and we talk about inclusion a lot. Maybe, you know, ageism is the sort of taboo, or maybe the forgotten, you know, representation that we have within our industry.
Yeah, I think certainly at times when I see briefs come through and they've been written by people in their mid-20s, there's either a view that if you're over 55, you're sad and alone and unhealthy and, you know, ready for, you know, your biscuits on the sofa, or you are going to be Helen Mirren and permanently on a cruise ship and living this fantastic life of a very wealthy retiree. And I think it's a balance. Most people over 55 are still working actually within the UK and have a very different lifestyle, and I think it's having more nuance in the same way as we wouldn't hopefully paint anybody who was between 18 and 24 with one massive picture. There are very differences that we need to really acknowledge.
If you're in a leadership role or a certain role within an agency or client or within our industry, that it seemed acceptable to be of that age. But then there are certain roles and certain levels that then you think that actually your age really does start to become a hindrance or become more noticeable. Is that something, again, that you've experienced or that you see around you?
Well, when I came back into the industry, I came back in as a manager actually, and that was 8 years ago, and that's because I'd lost my confidence.
Yeah.
And it was hard to get into the industry. Nowadays it's very, you know, it's more straightforward, but and I was willing to take a step back and to go slower because I felt I had to work harder to prove myself as an older person in the industry, and that was at 48, you know, at 38, and yet I felt already by that point a little bit embarrassed about coming in as a manager. And now as a team we're hiring more and more people to come who've gone out of the industry in either their mid-30s or mid-40s and who want to come back in. The problem is it's really hard to find them as well. You know, recruiters don't look they look in the obvious places, and it's hard to find people who've gone off to run B&Bs in Greece or look after parents. And it's normally through networks that we're able to bring these people back in who have the skills but who lack the confidence to come back.
Do you think, you know, I guess, are we really set up for maybe a generation that wants to spend more time at home, wants to spend time with families, isn't as flexible, if you like, in their lifestyle as when you're younger? You know, are we inherently as an industry ever going to be set up in that way?
I think actually, for once, the pandemic has been helpful. It has allowed more flexibility across all age groups to be able to accommodate a different way of approaching work. And I think actually it has meant that people are a bit more imaginative, and I know that some of the women's networking groups actually have introduced things like breakfasts that allow people to not necessarily put that emphasis on, well, being down the pub until 10 o'clock and that being an essential part of being part of the team. Obviously we all like being able to socialise with people, but there are different ways, and I think there is a more healthy balance that we can now introduce. But I think for everybody, the work hard, play hard approach, I think, can be really negative and can be counterproductive.
Yeah.
I used to see people leaving at mid-30s and thinking, actually, this is not the lifestyle that I want to be living. We're now seeing that in the late 20s, early 30s, actually. You know, the Great Resignation means that people are not finding what they need within the media industry. And part of that is because that, you know, are we really being able to offer people a career progression that is inclusive, that allows them to have a more balanced lifestyle?
I guess the pandemic has probably brought more pressure in some ways, actually, but then equally, hopefully, in the long run, say more flexibility at work, different ways, different approaches, different attitudes will hopefully benefit, you know, our industry a little bit more. I also kind of want to ask you about when you first felt conscious of your age.
I think probably the very first time was around the 30 under 30, and I think it's natural every time that you reach around age, and that's not actually from within the industry. That's just every time you go to a birthday card shop and you see, you know, it's from 30 that people start making jokes about, oh, you're over the hill, or, you know, ready for your slippers, and that's not a workplace thing. But I know certainly when I was coming back into the industry in my late 30s, I was worried a lot more about my appearance, about how I was going to fit in. And I think that's part and parcel to a certain degree of being a woman and getting older as a whole in society.
So one of the things I wanted to ask you is, when you're in your 20s and 30s and you want to change a career, or you just want to try something different, I certainly felt like the world was my oyster and I could just, you know, go out there, put myself out there. In your 40s, is there a reluctance to do that because you're concerned about how people might perceive that, or the choices that are available to you?
I think that when you see people lose a job or start looking for a job at a later age, you worry for them. You know, that you hear the horror stories of how long it takes to find something, and that's not just in media. It's also, you hear about it in the news as a whole, how hard it is when you're over 55 to be able to find a job. So I think as you get older, you naturally become more risk averse. You have more responsibilities, be that a mortgage or kids or other things that you want to make sure that you are still providing for. And so I think naturally you worry about moving and taking risks. I think also there's something around trying new things and feeling brave, and I think that that's something that we need to keep encouraging in ourselves, and it's not something that a company can force on you, but actually enjoying new things and keeping your mind open. When you first come into the business, you know nothing, and that's fine. I think as experience comes, you need to make sure that you don't solidify in your place of experience and wisdom and not realise that actually there's so much more to keep on trying and learning.
Do you think your role in the team is different because of your age? Do you think that you have a slightly different aura about you, or do you think people come to you for different things because of your experience and because of you know, just not the person that you are, but also the age that you are?
Oh, I'm sure they do. I'm sure they do. I mean, I don't have children, but you know, people have referred to me as the mum of the team, which I'm not sure how.
So how do you feel about that?
Well, I suppose biologically I could be, and therefore that's fine. But it's not necessarily something that I saw in myself. But naturally, as a team leader, I am there for people. I want to be able to help them and support them and reassure them, and that's what people look to at whatever age in a leader, and being able to give them an example. I hope I don't tell them off too much like a mother, though.
They wouldn't listen to you anyway if they're anything like my children. And in terms of sort of who you see in the industry, who you look up to, who's either of your age or older than you, do you see people around you that you can still aspire to? I mean, there's probably people that you've grown up with. I mean, are there people that you've grown up with along the way, or has that changed over time?
I would say most of the people who I started with are not in the industry,
Oh, really?
or not in the immediate industry. They will have gone
Yeah.
client side, set up their own businesses, or gone completely into something completely different. But no, there are incredibly strong, inspiring women in the industry, and that is something that we are lucky to see. And that's regardless of age. But certainly, they're leaders. And what I don't necessarily see around me are people who can be, I don't know, we don't have 50-year-old graduates
It's really
coming into the business. And I would really admire them, because that takes some guts and bravery to come in and do something completely new.
Yeah. And then also I just want to talk to you about sort of, as I don't know about you, but as your life sometimes goes on, it gets more complex, more factors, more things at play. Do you think we're doing enough as an industry in terms of supporting parents and carers? I know it's something that we've started looking at, and is that something you think that might be beneficial for keeping people, in the industry longer if there was more support and flexibility in that area?
I think support and flexibility in any area is hugely important, and it's wonderful that we're seeing a lot of emphasis around parenthood, whether it's motherhood or fatherhood, but it's also around, I think now we are seeing someone in my team, she's had a horrible family situation, and actually she has, it's been very hard as a manager to know how to deal with that, because there aren't set rules and there aren't the same timelines that you would have with parenthood, that you could say, oh, well, by the time they're 2, they start going to a school. With parents who are unwell, it's much more, it's less linear. And I think it would help people at any age group to be able to have that guidance. I think we have more and more people in the industry who are taking on responsibility earlier and earlier to be managers of teams. And that's a huge burden on them to know what to do in a situation like that they may not have gone through themselves. So the more that we can help give guidelines, I think the better. I don't think that we need to legislate everything and give guidelines for every single situation. It takes trust and support and an open conversation with HR and your company. But sometimes it helps to have some sort of guidelines, and we've introduced guidelines around menopause, which is equally very important to being able to raise that as a possible issue that people might not have thought about within the workplace.
I think as well, I mean, I guess there's a question mark, are we dealing with one of the last taboos in our industry? Because, I've seen plenty of forums, people talking about mental health, talking about all elements of their lifestyle. And I think that's brilliant, but I've never been invited to talk about my age, and this is the first time I've ever sat with anyone and discussed this. Do you think we are dealing with the sort of last taboo? And if there's anything that I guess people would like people to take out of this conversation, is it to think about it, or to raise it, to give people a platform to talk about it?
I think so. I think, I didn't want to do this in particular. I felt awkward. I was like, I don't want to be the poster child for old, because I don't feel old. But on the other hand, it's true, and I think what I would like people coming into the industry to think is, actually, this is an industry that has legs. This is an industry that will give you the opportunities and that you can build like a life plan around. Not that your life plan has to be, well, I can do this until I'm 40, 45, but I'm going to have to find an escape route because I don't see an opportunity to carry on. Because that's a huge waste of talent and energy, and also it's a fabulous industry to be in, and the more voices that we can have and the more inclusive we can be, the better it is, whatever age you're at. And maybe just don't make jokes about people's ages.
It's been amazing sitting talking to you today. It really has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for sharing your story, and thank you for being brave and coming forward. Thank you everyone for tuning in today, and I hope today that we've given you a bit of food for thought, and yeah, thank you for watching.